So this video, we're going to look at expressions in After Effects. Now there's only 3 expressions I'm really going to look at, these common ones of wiggle, loop, and time. And we're going to kind of just take a peek and just see what they do. So what they actually do is you can add a piece of JavaScript inside an animation. Even if you don't even have an animation yet, you could add an expression into a stopwatch, which is pretty cool. I'm going to show you how to do that. And what it allows you to do is add in some type of change in animation without actually adding any keyframes, which is a pretty cool way to do it. So right here I have this one set up, and that's all it's going to do. I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit, bring this down. That's all it's going to do is I'm just going to play, and it's just going to wiggle. So wiggle is one way to do it. Instead of having all these keyframes saying, yeah, go here, 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 all these different ones, all these different rotations, or position changes, or anchor point for that matter, I could actually just make a wiggle effect, a wiggle expression. And the way it works, I'm actually going to shut this off. I'm going to start this one from scratch. So I'm just going to make a very basic, square, whatever. It doesn't really matter. There it is. And I'm just going to bring it down. I can center. I'll center it, Command double click here, and I will also Option double click, and I'll center it on my composition. Okay, so there it is. So now what I can do, I could actually, create any type of animation I want. So if I want to say the thing is, I'm going to do one with an animation, and then I'm going to take it off and do it without an animation. So I'm actually going to do a quick position transition. So I'm just going to say here, I'm going to click on the stopwatch, create a keyframe. I'm going to bring it over here. And then at this point, a little bit more. Then at this point, CTI, I'm going to move over, and I'm going to make it move over here. And there is my position changed. I can see it is animating. That is my path. Great. Okay, that's it. So let's just take a quick peek. Great. Nice and simple. Halfway through. So what I can do now to add an expression, anytime I want to add an expression, that's all I have to do is hold down Option or Alt on a PC, hold down Option on a Mac, and I could just click on my stopwatch. Now I can do this if there's an animation there or not. So I can click on this, and my expressions shows up, expression position. Okay, now there's a couple things here we have to look at. Number one, my 2 specs, my X and Y, turn red. Well, that's just showing that these do have an expression attached to them, or something's about to happen here, because right now it says transform position. Well, I'm going to add a wiggle. So right now they're red, so an expression is applied to them. Okay, what else do we have here? We have the equal sign. Well, we'll look at that in just a second, but the equal just allows the expression to be there, but if I shut it off, if I click on it, it's the expression saying, yes, it's there, but it's not being used right now. And if I click it back on, it is equals, yes, it's being used right now. Okay, this graph, this little kind of almost show post expression graph. So it's almost a graph editor where it would actually show me what is actually happening with my particular expression that I'm using, all right, in my graph editor. And this is a pick whip, which I'll show you later. It just shows you can actually quickly make an expression by using your pick whip to select specs from another shape layer, another animation, or something like that. The plus sign is actually just a library. It's a library of many different expressions, all this different JavaScript that you could add. You could scroll through, but once again, there are many here, which I'm not going to talk about. I'm just going to talk about these main 3 that we have. So my first expression, what I'm going to do, I can actually get rid of this. So in this area here, I could just type anything I want. But what I'm going to type in is something very simple. And as soon as I start typing, this information shows up here, so I could actually make it a little bit quicker. So I'm going to type in wiggle, and as I type in, it shows up, and there it is, wiggle, in the parentheses. Now you don't have to do much here. If I just play this through right now, let's see what happens. Okay, not much. So what After Effects wants to have happen here says, well, you got to give me some parameters. See, there's an error there. It's like, you got to give me something. So the way it works in JavaScript, we have our word, and we have in our parentheses, we're going to have 2 numbers separated by a comma. So I'm going to say the first number is going to be the number of wiggles. So let's say we're going to have 10 wiggles. And then the second, if I press comma, my second amount is going to be how many, like how far is it going to go kind of idea. So let's just say another 10. And that's it. Let's see how that works. So now I'm going to play that, and let's see what happens. Okay, now it's starting to wiggle a little bit. It's going to have a little bit of interest there to this particular animation. So let's play around with this, and I'm going to bring this back. So I only want to play with a certain area here. There we go. So it's just gonna play over and over and over again. So what I'm going to do now, as I'm playing with that and as it's going, I'm going to change this up. So you know what? I want to have 50 wiggles. Okay, what's happening there? Let's go. Let's say I want it to be offset by almost like 100. So let's actually stop that and play it again. There we go. So I guess I can't just play it all the way through and it's going to change like some effects do. So now it's even more, so it's really getting crazy. So what I need to do is I could bring it down, I could do whatever I want. If I just want, I want one wiggle. I just want to give you an idea of how this actually works. I want one wiggle, and it's offset by 100 pixels, potentially 50 up, 50 down. I'm not too sure exactly how that works, but once again, if I bring it up, say I want 100 wiggles per second, now it's really crazy. Now the idea is imagine animating that. That would be very, very difficult to do. So the wiggle kind of adds a little bit of interest to what we're doing here. So let's go through this. So I'm playing the wiggle, and if I actually click on this equal sign, it's going to stop the wiggle, but the wiggle's still there. The expression is still there, but it just stops the wiggle from happening. Just if for whatever reason I just don't need at the moment, I just want to see it without it, but it's still there. I don't have to retype it in, or if I have a long piece of JavaScript, I don't have to retype it. I could just say, not right now, I don't need you right now. Cool. So the other thing I could do is right now, I could see my path. So if I look at that, I see my path, but I only see the main path that I've made. If I click on this extra button here, the show post expression graph, now it's actually showing me what the wiggle is actually doing to my path. And even on my graph editor is also kind of showing me what's happening here. And I do happen to be on my speed graph. If I go to my value graph, same idea. It's showing me obviously something slightly different. If I shut it off, it'll just show me normal, what's kind of going on. I'll also go back to my speed graph, and once again, very simple, not much is happening there, right? So having that on will allow me to see what is really happening with my path. So maybe I don't really need that, but I could also, I should assume I could fine tune some of that too. The next one here is the pick whip. I'll show you that one a little bit later, but that's more or less what an expression is. Hold down Option, click, or Alt on a PC, click on your stopwatch, and then obviously the expression shows up, and I could just click in here and just start, type in whatever expression. Now, obviously you have to be very specific on what you type. You can't have an extra space here. You can't have extra spaces. You got to keep it as is. So try to just keep it as tight as possible to this specific nomenclature. So what we have there is that, but you know what? Let me actually get rid of my animation. I'm just going to get rid of it. But look, the expression stays. So all that path is happening right in here. So let me bring it over. So the idea, what I'm trying to show you here, is you don't actually need to animate anything. Doesn't actually have to be any keyframes. You could just press play and it just animates in place. Now, obviously it's kind of going pretty crazy here right now. It's really moving around and having a good time, but we don't have to actually attach it to an animation. Let me show you another way what I'm talking about. I'm going to stop that. And here I am going to actually disable that for a moment. And let me add another one. I'm going to add it to the scale. So I'm going to do a scale, but I'm not going to actually make the animation. I'm not going to click on the stopwatch on its own. I'm going to hold on Option and click. The expression shows up. Once again, this also a twirl down button shows up. I can kind of say, yes, there is an expression attached to this. I know that because the type is red now, but I could twirl it down and say, oh, let's play around with the expression. So once again here, I'm just going to click in here. I'm going to type in wiggle, and I am going to do once again, a 10, 10. There I go, done. And let's just play that through and see what it does. Okay, it wiggles the scale. So that's pretty interesting too, what it could do. It can do quite a bit, which is pretty interesting. Okay, now I want to kind of take you to some stuff I already have set up prior. So we saw what happens when we have our normal shape layer type. It doesn't really matter, and we added a wiggle to it. Now what happens when I set it up so I can see all the different things a wiggle can do to all my different anchor point, position, scale, rotation, opacity. So let's just look at these ones really quickly and see what's going on. There we go. Okay, so each one has a wiggle attached to it. Now they're all the same except for the last one, the opacity here, because I think I needed to add a little bit more for the opacity to really be seen. So if I just play this through, we can see what the wiggle does to each of these. The anchor point moves it around a little bit, position it moves around a little bit more, scale, it messes with the scale, even rotation and even opacity. It kind of wiggles the opacity and wiggles the rotation. So you could actually play around with this in a very certain way and really fine tune your parameters here and make it so it, whatever this animation does for you, what it might do for you, you can utilize it in a very fine tuned kind of way. So hopefully that helps you understand the way we could play around with that. Now the next thing I want to show is this idea of this next one here. So the next one we're looking at here, let me just bring those down. Okay, is a time function. Okay, so time works with rotation. So it's the number of times something rotates within a second, or the number of degrees something rotates within a second. So I have a few of them set up here. So I have, let me bring this up a little bit so we can see that a little bit better. I have four set up here, and each one, the time is doing something different. Times 20, times 90, times 180, and times 1000. So it actually goes from this way. So this is the first one here at 20. This is the next one, time at 90, time at 100, and time at 1000. So I just want to show you what they do. At the beginning, they start here, but if I play it through, this is what it does. So this is rotating at 20 degrees per second. This one is rotating at, actually, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to actually play this through if I can. And I'm just going to let that go there. And this one is rotating 100 degrees per 100 degrees per second, I believe that's how it goes. And this one rotating 1000 degrees or so. So there's a lot happening here. Once again, just an interesting way to play around with it. I'm sure there's other little changes you can make here to make it a little bit more interesting, but this is just something we could play around with. But once again, no keyframes were made. This is just an expression that we used to help us create this animation. All right, so we'll stop that, and I'm going to bring that back down. All right, the next one is going to look at looping and how we could actually loop something here. So let's take a quick peek at what this one does. So once again, I've already set up the expression. It's red, so I know it's already set up. And here I have an expression here. I'm going to click on that expression. Okay, it's a loop out expression. So what I did, I created a quick animation. So let me bring you back to that. Okay, so this is the animation. And that's it. Let's just do a little bit of 3D work where it goes from your 0 degree to 90 degree on the x-axis, and it just comes down. Great. Now normally I'm going to shut this expression off. So just disable it for now. Normally what would happen is it would go there and it would stop there and done. Beautiful. That's all I needed. However, what if I wanted to keep on going? What if I had a certain animation? I just wanted to keep on going, but I don't want to keep on making put another keyframe, another set of keyframes, another set of keyframes. I can actually create a loop out animation where it just continues doing the same thing over and over and over, somewhat seamlessly, depending on how I've ended my animation. So let's try that. So what I could do now, that's all I did was I typed in loop out. So let me do this again. I'm just going to delete that. I'm going to type in loop. There's a loop in, there's loop in duration. I'm just going to do a loop out. Now I could set in my parameters here, my parentheses. I could set in a cycle, something like that. I'm just going to leave it alone because that's all I wanted to do is loop out to the end of the actual comp. This happens to be 30 seconds. So that's it. I leave it alone. I can shut it, I can collapse it, and I'm fine with that. And then I can just play it. And now instead of it just stopping, it's just going to continue going over and over and over again and looping out. Now this is very useful when you have maybe a small little animation. You just want it to keep going and looping instead of copying and pasting over and over and over again. Looping can be a really great way to play around to have an animation consistently keep moving. So that's looping, pretty simple there. Now the next one I wanted to show you was this idea of pick whip. So playing around with it, this might be useful to you, it might not be, but just to know that it's available to you is pretty cool. So I'm going to start this one from scratch. I'm just going to click on a circle. I have a blue fill, and I'm just going to click and drag, and there it is. And I'm just going to make some type as well. I'm going to click some type and just type in circle. Doesn't matter. All right, there we go. So I have a circle and I have some type that says circle. Make it a little bit bigger. That's a little too big, so make it a little bit smaller. And let's just do that for now. Perfect. So what I can do, I can actually set up a animation here. I'm going to actually do a wiggle animation on this, a wiggle expression, I should say, and then I'm just going to attach it to this, but using it in a slightly different way. I'm going to use the pick whip. So right here, I'm going to set up this animation. So let's go to transform and let's go to position. We'll create a position wiggle. So I'm going to hold down Option and click on the stopwatch. And I'm just going to type in a wiggle. And I want to make it somewhat significant so that I'm just going to click on this one here because it's already set up for me. And I'm just going to make it, 10, or actually, you know what, I'll do 50 and I'll do 100. So I'll be able to really see what's going on. So as I do that, yep, there it is. It's really having a hard time drinking lots of coffee. So what I can do now with the pick whip, I could actually say, you know what, whatever this is doing, I want this to do. It's almost like a parent and link. but it does it in a slightly different way. So let's look at the same position. So I'm going to hold on Option and click on the position. I'm going to grab this pick whip. I can also grab this pick whip without looking at it, without even setting up an animation yet. I can actually click on this pick whip and do the same thing. I'm just going to click on this pick whip, and I'm going to click on this set right here and say, this is what I want you to use. I want you to use this particular animation right here, position. I want you to use this expression, and that's it. And now it adds it, this comp.layer, shape layer 2, which this is, if I named it better, it would be a better name, transform.position. And now if I play it, now they're doing the same thing, but it also brought it over to that specific position. Let's try it a different way. Let's now take this one. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to take this position pick whip, but I'm only going to pick, instead of picking on the word position, I'm going to pick on just the number, the first x-axis number. Let's see what happens when I click on that. It's 515.3. Well, right away, both of these turn into 515.3. So it selected those options. Let's see what it does. Okay, pretty interesting. Let's do it another way. Let's go back to that, and this time pick whip, and I'm going to pick whip the last number, 5874, which obviously these two turn into 5874, and there I go, same idea. Okay, let's do it one more different way. I'm going to undo that. So obviously it's not red anymore, therefore there's nothing attached to it. I'm going to hold on Option and click. This time I'm going to use this pick whip just to see what the difference is, if there is a difference. Okay, I'm going to bring it over here. Once again, click on position, and I'm just going to let it play through. And it, obviously, yes, it does the same thing. But once again, we could still do a scale animation if we want to do a different scale animation and play around with that. You know what? Let's add a wiggle here, just to see what it does. And we'll also do another, 50, 100, and see what that does. Okay, so let's see. So now it's adding even more to it, which is great. So this has an extra wiggle on its scale. This is taking the wiggle expression from here. And once again, if I change this back to something more simple, let's just say 10. And let's say, once again, we'll do both 10. Calm it down a little bit. And now it'll do exactly what this one does in its position, and keep it nice and simple. So that's a way to play around with expressions. You might find some use of this, you might not. If you really control it and kind of have some fun with it, you might really find it work for you in a specific way that might work best in a kind of an animation you're trying to create, and this would actually be beneficial for you. So hopefully that helps. Just playing around with expressions a little bit. The loop out one is a really great one. The time one with rotation, you might use. The wiggle one, kind of interesting, but once again, it's a very specific style of animation you might utilize in your videos.